You are live, it says. All right. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to SerenityOS office hours. It is Friday. It is 4 p.m. in Sweden. And we're going to do what we always do and talk about SerenityOS. So if you are not familiar with the program, the basic idea is that chat decides what we talk about. Anything related to SerenityOS, technical, non-technical. If you have questions about something you're working on in SerenityOS, now is a great time to dig into stuff like that. But if you have high-level questions about the project, that's also appropriate. Anyways, good to see so many people already in the chat. Hello to you. And I'm glad you enjoyed the Discord video, Dummy Killer. The Discord video I posted last night was a lot of fun to make. It's one of those things that I've done so many times, but I've never really recorded it because I always thought of it as kind of a frustrating activity that often has like these long periods of just sitting there and staring at it and wondering why nothing happens. But I decided to record it, and it turned out pretty interesting, it seems like. And I ended up on a much better pace than I expected. So that's pretty good. Let's see. Rishab is asking, hello, have you ever written a formatting library? If so, do you have any suggestions about them? Not sure what a formatting library is. Do you mean like a string formatting library for like std format or printf or something like that? If so, I have written many printf type things. We don't use those anymore in SerenityOS. But there are printf is a very simple thing to implement. If you just go look at any implementation of it in any C library, then you will very quickly notice how you can do it. Let me just clear my throat with the mic off. All right, there's a handy on-off button on the mic there. I gotta learn how to use that a little bit smoother, but anyway. Jagger is asking, can we go over my little pixel paint hotkey pull request? Sure, why not? Let me get a bruiser up and running. Okay, so 12 to 39. Wait, that's not how you do that. This is how you do that. All right. So Jagger says, the new command palette feature conflicts with Pixel Paint's clear selection action keyboard shortcut. Oops. Yep. Control-Shift-A is indeed the shortcut that I ended up using for the command palette, and I guess Pixel Paint was using that for something. Jagger says, I chose not to replace the action hotkey with key escape directly, as this breaks other tools that use escape for canceling an action. Sure. Now, while dragging a rectangular selection, you can cancel it by hitting escape. Existing selections are cleared by escape as well if the rectangular select tool is active. Oh, and then I've actually already responded here. Let's see. So let's just approach this from first principles, since I don't exactly remember what was going on. Also, what's up with Firefox flickery flashing like that sometimes? I don't know. That's really sketch. Okay, so clear selection no longer has a hotkey, so let's just see what that looks like at the moment if we run Pixel Paint. Easton says, this is my first time watching it not 2x speed. It seems like Andreas is thinking at human speed now. Yeah. Well, I usually think at human speed, but of course, if you watch me in 2x, you're going to get a different idea about that. So let's take a look at Pixel Paint. So I guess clear selection right here. Yeah, Control-Shift-A. That will, of course, break the command palette, which does not appear due to this action swallowing the key combo. So it makes sense that we would drop that. And then let's look at what the substitute was. Use escape to clear rectangular selections. So what happens currently if you do that? I press escape, nothing happens. Yeah, I mean, I wish it would clear the selection in a case like that. Ooh, look at it. Also, can I... Wait, how do I merge selections and stuff? Oh, I guess I have to choose here. Yeah, we should definitely make it possible to create intersecting selections and stuff like that by just holding down Shift or Control to subtract. Anyway, yeah, escape. Intuitively, I want to press escape to nuke this, and it doesn't work. Listening on the rectangle select tool key down handler for that makes perfect sense. Yep. All right, so I think that's good. And then the conversation here was about duplicating the code for pressing escape and using clear selection. And Jagger was saying that it's duplicated in the mouse up handler when you click away from it. So what does rectangle select tool mouse up do? It will presumably clear, wait, no, end selection, end interactive selection. Wait, what? Which mouse up handler? Okay, well, I'm not sure exactly which mouse up handler that refers to, but either way, this seems perfectly fine. So I think let's just march. All right, cool. Thank you for fixing that. And you know what? Let's even pull and rebuild so that we can enjoy. Oh my goodness, I have to. I'm on a branch that I use for recording and streaming. Rebase master. All right. I want to see that cool escape in action. Let's see. Am I running away from questions here? Pavel says, regex with base64 PNG was fun to watch. Yeah, that that's amazing. I think it's funny, you know, how people like to complain about how the web is messy and like web frameworks are, you know, bloated and things like that. But you never really see just how weird things get until you look at it from the perspective of a browser engine, because a lot of websites do a lot of weird things, and most of the time you never find out about it. So making a browser really allows you to see into the sausage factory, and sometimes it can be a lot of weird stuff going on in there, such as running a regex on a PNG. Let's see. Flo Writes Code says, hey there, Andreas. Hope you're doing good. Really enjoyed watching your last video about Discord. By the way, this is Greenstone Movies. I merged my my subs from my old account to this new one. Well, welcome back, Greenstone Movies. Consolidating those YouTube accounts. Bluta says, it was fun seeing how Discord works behind the scenes. Well, to be fair, we didn't really see a lot of that, at least not yet, because we're still struggling to make even the welcome page on the web server appear in the browser. So clear selection is now shortcutless, and if I were to make one of these and slap escape, look at it disappear. That's awesome. Thank you, Jagger, for working on that. And of course, now we can bring up the command palette, and we can clear the selection from here if we wanted to. Very cool. Let's see. Steen says, as a GitHub sponsor, I'm curious, are there any Patreon exclusives, or are both means of supporting the project basically equivalent? Yes, they are equivalent. I don't offer anything in particular to anybody who sponsors me, because I guess I feel like I would prefer not to not to make any difference to, how do I say this? I don't want to create like a separation of the audience between the people who sponsor me and the people who don't. I want everybody to have access to everything. So because of that, there are no sponsorship exclusives. So either way, thank you very much for the support, though. I really do appreciate that. Let's see. Phoenix Firewing says, do you plan to make more videos about getting Discord working? I don't have a plan for anything in particular. I feel like that has come up before, but I'm not sure. G says, hello, SerenityOS will have Wayland support. There is no plan for Wayland support. Jagger says that Pixel Paint has a ton of actions that show up in the command palette too. Right, yeah. Lot of actions here. This is really kick-ass though, because Pixel Paint is one of those apps that, I mean, already has a ton of actions, and as the application matures, it's just going to get more and more actions. So being able to scan through them in a text format like this is really, really helpful, I think. Refrag says, hello, thanks for guiding me to the SDL stage of the GUI last time. I didn't think it was in the repo. I got that pixel by pixel rendering, and I actually couldn't find the solution you used online. Not sure what you mean by that, but at least it sounds like you were making some progress, so that's good. Let's see. BEL says, just watched your Discord video. Question, why not just debug your JavaScript engine with an open source web app like Matrix, Mastodon, Rocket Chat? Well, because every application is different. It's a bit like if you are making a browser is a lot like making an emulator, right? And say that you're building a Nintendo 64 emulator. Now, just because you have a Super Mario 64 working doesn't mean that Zelda Ocarina of Time is going to play in your emulator. Really, you have to look at each individual ROM or website, if you will, and see sort of how they interact with the machine that you're emulating and what kind of functionality they're trying to make use of. So making a browser is very much about like targeting individual websites and figuring out sort of what's going on here, because every website is going to do something new that the other ones don't do. And I have many years of experience doing that, and I can confidently say that every big web app out there does at least 10 things that no other web app does. So you just have to look at them individually. Like you can certainly improve your compliance, and you can improve your compatibility by working on each of these things. But in order to make something specific work, you have to actually try to load that thing. Let's see. Flow Writes Code says, I was so excited when the background of Discord changed to that gray tone instead of white. Yeah. I'm glad that I was able to set up really modest expectations in that video, by just saying that, you know, the whole point was to just get something to show up in the DOM. If we had targeted anything higher than that, it would have been a disappointment for sure. So let's see where it's at right now. So now I don't have any of my local hacks, which probably means that it's going to stop at that bizarre regex on the PNG. But I think we might see the color before then. Yeah, so we do get to this sweet color. And now it's just making real sure that the PNG doesn't have any non-ASCII characters in it. So pretty cool. I definitely want to make more of these, and it's very likely that other people will eventually contribute towards it. So there will probably be sort of steps happening in between the videos, right? So you don't get to see sort of every step of the way, because usually what happens is just other people notice something that they want to do, and that happens in between the videos. But it's definitely something to continue on because we use Discord. I use Discord every day, so of course I needed to work on SerenityOS. Let's see. Ria says, I think the Canvas stuff was a third-party fingerprinting script. Yeah, that's very, very likely. It was some kind of fingerprinting or just tracking, basically. Yeah, I guess fingerprinting is the easy way to say that. Yeah, fingerprinting, just trying to figure out like a way to identify this browser. Cyotaffer says, do you think a full browser like Mozilla and Chrome takes more work to create than an operating system? Well, that really depends on what you consider an operating system. Personally, I think a browser is just part of an operating system. So I'm going to have to say no, because obviously you have to build the browser and the kernel and the desktop and all the things. But if you are a purist who thinks that an operating system is just a kernel, or perhaps a kernel in a C library or whatever, I don't know. Browsers are a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff in them, a lot of things that need to click. But the one thing about them is that they are really well defined compared to an operating system, which it's much more loosey-goosey. If say that you have something like you want to implement a POSIX interface, but outside of that, like it's pretty free form. Whereas if you're building a browser, it's really like you have to do all these things. So there are pros and cons to that. I guess the pros are that you don't have to think so much about how things should work. It's already set in stone. So you just have to kind of implement it. But in terms of like bulk work that you just have to do, it's a lot of work. So I don't know the answer. I guess it really depends on what you would consider an operating system. Ecoptic says, hi Andreas, I had an idea for compilers to have an option to disable some checking to compile faster. If the user knows the code is correct, it could be useful for downloaded libraries, for example. Well, the one problem with that, I guess, is that when you're downloading source code, if you're downloading source code to build it locally, you're usually building it against your local libraries and local headers, right? And maybe the source code you downloaded is technically correct, but it includes something from your local machine that is incorrect. So how would you know that you can trust sort of the resulting code after the preprocessor stage? Anyways, either way, like it's certainly faster. Like you can already build really fast if you turn off optimizations, warnings, all those things. Yeah, you get a faster build, but I don't know that you save valuable time unless we're talking about like sort of continuous incremental rebuild during development process. But if you're just building something for the purposes of like installing packages on your machine, it seems better to me to build with warnings and build with checks as much as possible, just to make sure that what you're installing actually ends up working the way you expect it to. Colin Foster says, hi Andreas, I think you're really good at learning, and I wonder, do you have any suggestions for people who are learning something new? Especially. So I think you got cut off there, but suggestions for people learning something new. I guess if we're talking about programming, my number one suggestion to anybody who's trying to learn programming is to learn by doing. You want to actively write code and mess around manually instead of just reading books about programming or reading tutorials and stuff. Like you want to get your hands dirty as soon as possible. At least in my experience, you learn way faster when you actually sort of physically step through all of the mistakes. it depends on what you're trying to learn, of course, but if you're trying to learn, let's say that you're trying to learn a new code base. What I usually recommend, if somebody joins a project or gets a job somewhere and they have to learn a new code base, what I like to tell people is to build the thing and then modify the code as you sort of read the code, and add your own print statements and add your own logging, add your own assertions and things like that, and then run the program locally and just use those log statements and assertions and stuff to validate that your assumptions make sense. That's something that I love to do because it sort of incrementally updates my mental model, and the model in my head ends up feeling much more stable and reliable because I've sort of validated it by making it print out stuff as I learn about it. Yeah, I guess really both of those things are about active learning, about like get your hands dirty, write code, don't just read, don't just plan, don't just think ahead, but get into the moment and work on something. And never be afraid to build a piece of crap, because very often you can learn so much from building a piece of crap much faster, more efficiently than if you were to try and absorb as much knowledge as possible to ensure that your first version is as good as possible. It's usually more productive to write a piece of crap and learn from that, and then throw the piece of crap away and start over now that you know a lot more. I guess these are some loose tips about learning. Let's see. Yelle says, you've been working on mutexes versus spin locks in the kernel recently. How do you feel about hybrid mutexes / spin locks? Mutexes that can spin lock for a short time, spin locks that can yield. So I think mutexes that can spin lock for a short time are very neat, and I think that's a good optimization. There's a great article on the WebKit blog about locking, where my friend Phil implemented a bunch of interesting lock mechanisms here. Definitely recommend it for anyone who's interested in locking. I think the optimization where you allow a mutex to act as a spin lock at first for a couple of cycles is really sweet. And I think in real situations, it's very often the case that you end up not having to block, which is then really valuable. But I'm less sure about spin locks that can yield. I think at least in the Serenity kernel, at the moment, the way that spin locks work is that they implicitly enter a critical section for the current CPU. And we currently allow threads to block in critical sections, which is really, really weird. And it's causing a lot of bizarre issues. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to get rid of and trying to enforce, that you can't block while you're in a critical section. The main problem with that is that you can wake up on a different CPU than the one you blocked on, and then that breaks assumptions down the line. But yeah, I guess that's something that we can talk about. If anybody's interested in improving locking in SerenityOS, there's certainly a bunch of things to do. And please come to the kernel channel on Discord and we can talk about it. Alex says, there is no plan. Is that the theme of do what you want? I guess kind of. I mean, everybody is allowed to have a plan. I just don't have one myself. Dirty Smokey with the super chat saying, fantastic work. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Dirty Smokey. That is really nice of you. I super appreciate that. Super appreciate that super chat. Bluta says, will Picture Paint ever support setting custom keybinds? As with any other feature, maybe, maybe not. The way to ensure that a feature comes into existence is by working on it yourself. Outside of that, I can't really tell you what will happen in the future. Nicholas says, seeing ScumVM on Serenity, did you play adventure games when you were younger, and did you enjoy them? I did. I did play a lot of adventure games when I was younger. And the first adventure game I guess I played was this kind of really juvenile game from Sierra called Leisure Suit Larry, which is just a really goofy game. And my father got it from one of his co-workers, and yeah, this one from '87. And it's like a point and click game, but before I even had a mouse, so you had to type in the equivalent of pointing and clicking. But yeah, I played a lot of other adventure games too. This was just my first one, but I played King's Quest and the Indiana Jones games, I think, and Shadowgate was a big favorite. Air Hogan says, now I want a Serenity 64 emulator. Yeah, that sounds like a thing. If you make one, we can take a look at it. Let's see. Paul Rat says, the way the command palette works, could it be used with something like a script or macro recorder to automate or replay an action list? I don't know that would be the best entry point for something like that, but you can certainly automate the GUI if we expose just a little bit more about it. It's not too far off from being automated due to the way that everything is built up on core objects, which have some amount of introspection opportunities. Let's see. Anatomiska Kritsar says, what is your wallpaper? Looks very cool. This is a painting by Simon Stålenhag, who makes absolutely kick-ass sci-fi paintings about sort of an imaginary future Sweden, or like it's an imaginary past Sweden, maybe like the 80s, 1980s, but where aliens came to the planet somehow. It's very, 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 very cool stuff. I love his art, so I will put his name in the chat so that you can look him up. Jagger says, one thing I noticed while testing the Pixel Paint clear selection thing was that if you're moving the mouse when you hit escape, it doesn't catch the key event. Seems to happen in other places as well. Wait, what? That's a bit weird. Let's see. So you're saying that if I move the mouse while hitting escape, while trying to dismiss a selection like this. Not sure how to repro that one. But if you're moving the mouse and it's swallowing key events, that does remind me of a bug in QEMU that I think is fixed in the latest version of QEMU. So do check if you are running the latest QEMU. They used to have a bug in the so we're using PS2 mouse and PS2 keyboard in SerenityOS, and the way that those devices work is that they sort of share an I/O port, and I think sometimes it could happen in QEMU's implementation of these devices that one would clobber the other in an incorrect way, and so you would sort of lose packets from the mouse or from the keyboard sometimes under some conditions. But I think that was fixed in the latest QEMU. Let's see. Michelle with the super chat. Thank you very much, Michelle. Love from Italy. Italy is a lovely country. Thank you very much for the super chat. I haven't been there in a long time. Last time I was there was 2014, I think. And I ate pizza every day, and it was amazing. Thank you for the super chat. Ecoptic says, is Serenity POSIX compliant? Do you care about Serenity being fully compliant or not? It's partially POSIX compliant. I don't care about being fully compliant, but I think targeting a high level of compliance is a reasonable thing. But there are things in POSIX that are just kind of low value, I guess, like supporting every single weird option to every single POSIX command and things like that. Not necessarily something that I care deeply about. But as far as like, you know, the basic standard C library stuff, it's good to have a reasonably high level of POSIX compliance there, because it gives us access to all kinds of third-party software and games and stuff like that people might want to run, and they just kind of work almost out of the box, which is just really sweet. And, you know, even though we are building everything ourselves, I think it is still cool to have sort of that POSIX base where if somebody wants to, they can take random POSIX compliant application and just compile the source on Serenity and it just works. I think that's really sweet. Let's see. TG says, maybe not a programming question, but have you served in the Army? No, I have not served in the Army. I was in the, I went to this, what do they call it? Conscription or whatever, thing where I had to meet, I had to do physical tests and psychological tests, some kind of evaluation day, basically. I got bussed there with other guys from my city, and I didn't pass all of the tests, so I ended up not having to serve. And then the year that I went, that was the last year in Sweden when conscription was mandatory. The year after that, it became optional, and as far as I know, it's still optional. Let's see. Javier says, hi, Andreas. Were you ever involved in the demo scene back in the day? No, I was not involved in the demo scene. But I saw some demos and I thought they were cool. But no, I was never into that. I didn't do a lot of graphics programming when I was younger for some reason. I was a little bit intimidated, I think, by graphics. And it always seemed to me like something that that is out of reach for me. I didn't really know why. I think I had this weird idea that graphics, that was something you did on like a Commodore or an Amiga or something like that. And I just had a boring PC at home. And because of that, I was sort of stuck in this way of thinking that, oh, the PC is for office applications and text-based applications. And I don't have a cool Commodore, so I can't do graphics. And because of that weird mindset, I just never spent the time to learn about it. Very strange. Eliter Roger says, Andreas, so let's say you make 4K a month from people supporting the project. At which point will you start thinking about a plan and what to do, or will you just spend 20 years without a plan? I will spend the rest of my life without a plan, if I can, and see what happens. But I don't have a plan to do that either. I know that many people can't relate to this idea of not having a plan and really just taking things one day at a time, but that's what I'm doing, and it's working fine. If things stop working fine, then we'll have to reconsider. But I really I really don't think that there would be any benefits that I could see to trying to constrain myself to a plan, I guess. Dammy Killer says, make it work first, then worry about cleaning it up and optimizing. Yes, absolutely. Jrest Zongo says, Andreas, first off, sorry, I use hearing aids and have voice processing issues. Have you thought about implementing standards first, then focusing on websites? So I don't know how to answer that. I mean, yes, I have thought about that, but that's not really a fun way to build a browser. Because if you just sit there and implement standard after standard after standard and never try it out on a real website, then you're probably going to lose motivation long before you get anywhere interesting. I find that a hybrid approach where you spend a little bit of time on standards and then you take a random website and try to get it to work, that's the more healthy approach. And the thing is that focusing on a website is about implementing standards. I think maybe many people don't understand that, but trying to make Discord work is not about doing something other than implementing standards. It's still about implementing the standards. It's just about implementing sort of a very narrow, specific slice of standards that are required to support a website. But the end result of the work is identical, whether you start from the side of the standard or start from the side of a website. It's just one of those approaches, in my view, is a lot more mentally stimulating. And then Joes Tsongo also asked, did you work at Mimo back in Nokia? I didn't work on Mimo specifically, but I worked on applications on top of Mimo for a short while, and then on top of Migo as well. I worked on the Qt library and on the WebKit engine, WebKit port for Migo, and I also worked a little bit on the browser for Migo. Flow Writes Code says, have you ever thought about completely rewriting some core part of Serenity / one of its apps? I often find myself reaching for rewrites instead of refactors out of laziness. I have never thought about that. I come from a long career of working on long-term projects, so I don't really have this way of thinking that I just want to rewrite things. I know that's a common way that many people feel, but most of the projects I worked on in my life have been 10+ year projects, and so that's just what I'm used to. I'm used to being in these projects where rewriting is not an option. Like, instead you do incremental refactoring and continuous incremental refactoring to improve things. And not only it's not only what I'm used to, but it also what seems way more productive to me. Because rewrites are perhaps fun, but not necessarily the best use of time, because if you compare it to like refactoring something to try to fix some specific issue, because every time that you rewrite something, you're sure to introduce new flaws, right? And it's a little bit of the better the devil you know, I guess. Like, Serenity certainly has many architectural flaws and things that could benefit from re-architecting and refactoring and redesigning, but I think rewriting wouldn't solve those problems any better than targeted refactoring would. Scriptspin says, hi Andreas, I realize this might be a silly question, but I have been wondering, what monitor do you use for working on Serenity? Which resolution and monitor size feels best for you? Well, let's find out. I'm using a Samsung Electric Company 27-inch monitor on the left and an Anchor Communications 27-inch on the right. So these two guys right here. And normally, if I'm not streaming, streaming or recording, I usually bump up the resolution to 1440p. But I find that 1080p just seems like a little bit of a nicer format for streams. Let's see. Clever King says, "Hi Andreas, are you going to make a video series about Discord? If so, what is your goal? Just make Discord load or make it actually usable from the browser?" Well, I don't know. I don't have a plan, as I like to say, but I will probably make more videos about it. The goal would just be to improve compatibility as much as possible until we can actually use it from the browser, of course. That is the long-term goal. Making it load, I don't think that would take... It's not going to take that long to just make the page load a bit more. But to make it usable, that's going to take a bunch of work. But it's work that we have to do, right? So if I can record some of it and make interesting content for people, I would love to do that. YippieDev says, "Andreas, can you beatbox?" I don't think so. And I can't say that I've really practiced it. Shiodox says, "If you hadn't gotten into C++ growing up, is there a programming language you'd have liked to work with or a type of application you'd have liked to work on?" If I hadn't gotten into C++, I don't know. When I was a kid, I was a big fan of Office software. Like, I thought that Microsoft Office was the coolest software. And it's a bit nerdy, but, you know. But I guess that was also written in C++. So I don't know what I would have liked to work on if I hadn't gotten into C++. Maybe some way of making games, I guess. Like so many other kids, I went through a phase of thinking that it would be cool to make games, but every time that I tried it, I just had to learn that I was just not interested in making games, and I just wanted to play them. But I don't know if there's another language I would have liked to work with. I guess assembly language seemed really cool to me as a kid. Like the fact that you could do stuff with such tiny little instructions, it was really impressive to me. And it wasn't until I got older that I got a good grasp of how it actually works. So that could have been fun to do more of. But nah. I guess I'm not so good at imagining like what would I do differently, or what would I have done if this or that hadn't happened. Whenever I do some thought exercise like that, I always stumble and struggle. Anyway, Chassis says that their first C++ project is an operating system, even though they don't know C++, and should maybe have started with something smaller. Yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit smaller if that's your first project. But at least you learned something now. Let's see. Joas Zongo was, "How is your perspective on the Apple revolutionary releases, Andreas?" Not exactly sure what the Apple revolutionary releases are. Anyways, see, Phoenix Firewing says, "If I wrote an implementation of Vulkan for Serenity, should I do one big pull request or break the API into small chunks?" I would recommend doing it in small chunks if you implement the entire Vulkan API. Let's see. DiamondKiller37 says, "I have all of his books. They are fantastic. Big fan." If you're talking about Simon Stollenhag, then I agree they are fantastic. Oh, sounds like people like Simon. That's awesome. Oh my goodness, I'm so far behind. Let's see. Ecoptic says, how did you implement libc? Did you write it fully in C, or did you write headers in C and link them to CPP? I'm sorry if this is a weird question. I'm not sure what would be the way to write libc in a Rust operating system. Libc in Serenity is written in C++, but it exports C symbols so that we don't mangle them with C++ names. But if you're writing in C++, there is really no reason to constrain yourself to using only C features unless you are trying to... I don't know why you would do that. So because we're writing in C++, we use C++ for libc. Let's see. Is that Igor, or what is this? I have to cheat and look it up. Igor says, do you think in the future to support cross-language support like Rust for some portions of the operating system? I don't really have a plan for the future. If you can believe it, it's possible that we would have first-class support for another language in the future. It's possible that C++ will remain the only first-class language. It remains to be seen. But there is no plan for one thing or the other at the moment. Let's see. 1337 says, hey, today happens to be my birthday. Happy birthday, 1337. I hope you're having a good one. And then they ask, do you like when colleagues at work congratulate you, or do you prefer silence? I tell you what, when I was younger, I used to hate it. And I used to avoid telling people my birthday. I remember when I worked at Nokia, I was friends with my coworkers on Facebook, and they all congratulated me on my birthday on Facebook one year. And I remember I was like a little edgy 20-something boy, and I was really annoyed by this because it felt fake and hollow to me that they would write happy birthday to me, even coworkers that I didn't even talk to. If I would meet them at the coffee maker on Facebook, they were like, happy birthday, Andreas. So what I did was, to prove some kind of point, what I did was I would change my birthday. I just moved my birthday 1 week ahead, and sure enough, the next week, all those people said, happy birthday, Andreas, again. And I kept doing that for, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, and people eventually caught on, but I remember being really annoyed by the whole thing at the time. But nowadays, now that I'm a bit older, a bit calmer, a bit less edgy, I don't mind it. I like to congratulate others, and I appreciate congratulations coming my way. I think it's nice to acknowledge that you're happy that somebody was born, right? And when it comes to, for example, anybody in the SerenityOS community having a birthday, of course I'm happy that they're born, because that brought them to me and to this little project that I started. So I'm always eager to wish anyone a happy birthday. But I can certainly relate to being annoyed by it when I was younger. So I don't know how old you are. Presumably this is not your birth year, but happy birthday regardless. Jagger says, it's too bad Discord is so grumpy about third-party clients. That would feel like a more Serenity solution. I think yes and no. While it might be neat to have a third-party client for Discord, at the same time, like, maintaining and supporting that doesn't really seem like fun to me. And at the same time, like, improving our browser support for standards and for web apps will be extremely useful to us, or anyone who wants to use the browser in the future, because it, like, every time that you get something working in the browser, you accidentally also get half of something else working. That's typically how it works. So if you can go in almost any direction with the browser and try to improve any website, and by doing that, you will lift up random other websites in unexpected ways so that they work better. And I think that's a better investment of labor as far as I'm concerned. Koshbji says, what is your opinion on C++ standard about freestanding that does not provide std move, std add reserve, and std array? I don't have an opinion about C++ freestanding. So because we don't use that. We don't use the standard template library, so don't really care one way or the other about it, and I don't have an opinion. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, I don't know. Michael says, have you ever tried out the Ada programming language before? It's a Pascal-based C++ competitor in the 1980s that is not very popular these days. I think it has a lot of incredible ideas. I have not done that. I read a book about it in the early 90s that I got at the local library. Because when I was a kid, I would just get every programming book in the library and read them. But the big problem with that back then was that I could read about a language, but I couldn't get my hands on a compiler. So I ended up like never actually getting a chance to use any of these things. So I read about them, but since I couldn't try any of it, it eventually sort of disappeared off my radar. So I've never tried Ada in practice. I just read about it as a child. But I do hear good things about it from a small number of people. So maybe it's cool. Let's see. Armo says, I wrote many little things in VBA using Excel and Access. Very powerful for automation of tasks. Yeah, VBA is really cool. Although it's really strange with VBA. If you're using it in a language other than English, then they have localized programming language keywords, which it's really weird to see like an if statement written out in Swedish instead of in English with like if. Like all the programming language keywords are localized, and I kind of hate it. It looks so stupid. But it is a cool feature in the Office suite for sure. Alex says, on the goal of being able to develop Serenity in Serenity, how would you want to test changes? Build a new version and reboot? Or does Serenity need something like QEMU? So I think both approaches are feasible. And for a large part of the system, you don't even need to reboot, right? Like if say that you're working on a text editor, you can just rebuild text editor and start a new text editor. But some things require either rebooting or emulating. Like if you're working on the kernel, for example, I think the more productive approach is most likely to build a hypervisor like QEMU, so that we can monitor the kernel as we boot it and run it. But in the short term, you can certainly like rebuild the kernel and just reboot into the new kernel. But I think it would be nice to build an emulator like QEMU for the system. That's something that we will eventually need if we want to do kernel development. And of course, it would also be possible to just port QEMU. It might not be terribly difficult to do even today, although it wouldn't have the equivalent of KVM, like hardware accelerated virtualization. It would be all JIT emulation, but even that would be pretty good for just being able to debug the kernel inside Serenity. But I haven't actually tried to build QEMU. I don't know what is missing for that to work. Shaziz says, actually, Andreas, my C++ operating system actually does boot, and I believe it has CPU ID support, but a lot of code is either from a tutorial from OS Dev Wiki. Yeah. Okay. I'm not exactly sure what that's in reference to, but cool. Aaron says, hi Andreas, have you tried Oberon OS? Seems like a very cool system to explore and learn from. I've never tried it myself. I have read about it a little bit, and it sounds a little cute, I guess, but it didn't captivate my interest. So it's one of those things where I feel like I'll probably look at that at some point. But then I don't know why. I have a lot of things like that. No judgment against them. It's just, it's strange how you can accumulate things your whole life that are kind of interesting, but not interesting enough to break out of your routine to actually check them out. And for sure, I'm missing out on awesome stuff because of that. Maybe I need to rethink my strategy there. Either way, Lion Cat Studios says, cool, I just found out about SerenityOS. It looks awesome. Welcome to the club. I also think it looks awesome. Let's see. Arseni says, hi, why allow calling Macs with different types? Const expertise Macs. What is identity type? I don't remember. Maybe there's a reason, maybe not. Is it causing you any problems? That's a very specific question with no explanation of why this is good or bad or a concern. So I don't know really how to answer it. Paul Rad says the secret to SerenityOS is in the name. That is absolutely true. Serenity, it's what it's all about. F Society says, is there an installer for installing it on hardware? No, there is no installer. There is an installation guide for installing it on hardware, which you can find in documentation. Dun, 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 dun. And then it's called, what is it called? Bare metal installation. Yes, this guy right here is the document. Now, it's a pretty hairy procedure, so definitely expect to possibly break the machine you're installing it on if you don't know what you're doing, so just be careful. Andrew Castor says, if you think Ada is not popular, you haven't seen many US government projects up close. I don't think most people have seen many US government projects up close, Andrew, but that's true. My perspective is limited to private sector projects. I have not looked at any of your government projects, I swear. And I don't think that I ever will. But thank you for informing us about the apparent popularity of Ada within the public sector. Let's see. How do we read this? Deal man wanted to say thanks for your video around getting Discord to work. Fascinating to watch the process you use to work through the problem. Yeah, it is certainly a process. I'm glad you enjoyed the video. I know I made a bunch of mistakes in the video, and sort of things that I went on these tangents where I was wrong about something, but I'm glad that I was able to capture a very, very honest, realistic portrayal of how you would do something like that. And really, I hope that people can see that and understand that this is something that you can do too, right? Like you can take our browser and point it at a random website and just take what comes in and work your way through what might be going on and what might you do to improve it and make it actually load. I can do it faster than most people because I've done it so many times, but anybody can learn how to do it if they just try it and practice, I guess is my point. So I really hope that that somebody got maybe inspired to try to do something like that. That would be fun. Valtteri is saying, just wrapped up my current job. Happy weekend, everyone. Dude, congratulations on wrapping up your current job. I guess that means you are moving on to a new job. That is kick-ass. Very exciting. Very excited for you, dude. Krister Lind says, in relation to last night's video, first, super cool. Has any further progression been made off cam? I did one thing off cam, which was, I'll show you. I did this one patch. Where is it? Or actually two patches. I did one where I made resource load errors show up in red in the debug log instead of green, because I had that missing slash in a URL. And the error, it kept showing an error about it, but because the error string was green, I didn't think it was an error, so I kept ignoring it. So I changed resource load errors to be red in the debug output. And I also added the keyboard event constructor to the window object. So that's something that that was like the very last thing you could see in the video, was that it was complaining that it couldn't find window.key event or window.keyboard event. So basically, all of the different web platform objects can be constructed from the window object. So they are here, like window, keyboard, event, and this is how you're able to do new keyboard event, for example. Of course, you have to pass in arguments to the constructor, but the way that this is found is because it's a property on the window object or the global object. So we were missing that, and that was just an oversight because we already had the keyboard event class implemented. It was just missing here in this big list of window object interfaces. So I went and added that, but I don't think that it changed anything. As you could see when we were loading the page, it was still just showing gray. Let's see. Supernova says, hello, will SerenityOS ever get its own compiler so GCC and G++ are not required? Maybe, maybe not. But if you really want it to have its own compiler, you can build one, and then we can take a look at it. Ali says that identity type T is a dependent type. When used as a function parameter, it will not participate in overload resolution. All right. Thank you for the detailed information, Ali. Let's see. Dominic says, where are you finding all these great wallpapers for every video/stream? Do you search for them every day for yourself or only for videos? I usually, whenever I'm going to record a video, I go and I look for a new wallpaper. And I usually just do it on Google. So I just go to Google, and yesterday I wanted one from Simon Stoltenhag, so I just went and searched for that, and then I just browsed through different pictures until I found one that I liked, and I picked this one. Scion says, does Windows contain spyware? I don't know. I guess it depends on how you define spyware. Dead Marshall says, hi, can you explain how shared memory and multi-threading system works in Serenity? Sure. So shared memory works by let's see, where do we start? So every process, let's start at the process level. So every process has what we call an address space. And the process address space is where the entire virtual memory layout of an individual process is stored. So let me bring up Serenity. So let's get the process address space of, not task map, taskbar, of the taskbar. So here, this is the address space of the taskbar program. As you can see, it has a lot of bitmaps loaded. But basically, these are virtual addresses, and here are the size protection bits and the name of that memory region. So every process has its own address space, and each one of these is called a region, and an address space is basically a container of regions, right? And a region then is backed by something, and depending on what you map into your address space, you always get a region, but that region is going to have some different underlying object that it sits on top of, and it's sort of a view into an underlying object. And those underlying objects are called VM objects. So region here, represents one of these guys, and a region has an underlying VM object somewhere here. Yes, right here. And a VM object, the two most common VM object types are anonymous VM objects and inode VM objects. Anonymous is what you get if you use mmap map anonymous. So it's like memory that has nothing to do with the file. And an inode VM object is memory that is a view onto a file in the file system. So it's a memory mapped file, basically. So we have anonymous VM object, and we have inode VM object. Now, the thing is, VM objects are not tied to a specific process or address space. The same VM object can be mapped into multiple regions at the same time because these are reference counted. So as you can see here in the bottom at the declaration of regions mvm object member, it is a ref putter, which means that it is a reference counting pointer. So every region has one of these things, and it can we share memory between processes by having a region in both processes pointing to the same VM object. That's how memory sharing works. And you can set that up in a couple of different ways. For example, if two programs memory map the same file, and they use map shared when they call mmap, now they have a shared mapping. They refer to the same VM object, even though those regions in the individual programs might be mapped to different addresses, they still have the same underlying VM object. You can also achieve sharing by creating anonymous memory and then sending a file descriptor that refers to it across the process boundary. So like you send a file descriptor from one process to the other, and then you memory map the file descriptor. Now you have anonymous memory shared between two programs. And that mechanism is basically the foundation of our windowing system. So every bitmap here, like the bitmap with this text in it that terminal uses, and the bitmap that has the desktop, all of these bitmaps that we render on the screen, they are all anonymous memory that is shared between the Windows server and the program that's responsible for rendering those window bitmaps. You know, there's a lot more details to it, but that's sort of the high-level overview. And multi-threading, on the other hand, is basically simple Unix multi-threading. Every process has a number of threads. Most have one, but you can spawn more threads in a process if you want. But it has basically the same threading semantics as Linux and other Unix systems. So unless you have more specific questions, I don't know exactly how to answer the question. So let's move on to something else. Let's see. Daniel says, "Hi Andreas, really enjoy all of your content. Thank you so much for educating all of us. What would you recommend for not feeling down when you make mistakes? 8 years in the field, still feel bad." Well, not feeling bad when you make mistakes. I guess the most important thing to know is that everybody fucks up. You know, I fuck up, you fuck up, your neighbor fucks up, your coworkers fuck up, your boss fucks up. And it's just part of life that we're always going to fuck things up every now and then. But one of the most powerful things that you can do that has really helped me is when you mess something up, just admit to it as soon as possible and be completely honest. So I had this problem for many years that I would mess something up, and then I would try to kind of salvage the situation by fixing it and not telling anybody, or maybe like coming up for some excuse why it wasn't just my fault, or trying to make it look like it wasn't as bad as it really was, or all kinds of things. Like I would always go into this damage control mode whenever I messed something up. And at some point I realized that I can also just say, oh, hold on, I messed up here. I really messed this up, and here's how it's broken. Here's everything I know. And maybe you can help me fix the situation, right? And that's really scary at first, especially if you got used to trying to sort of portray yourself as somebody who doesn't mess up. But once you try it for a bit to be like brutally honest about your own mistakes, you'll notice that they stop being so scary, because instead of hiding from your problems, you start developing a real mature process for dealing with them. And I think maturity tends to come from honesty. So that's where I would invest my effort if I were you. Samuel says, what's the plan for SerenityOS? There is no plan, Samuel. And I think you know that because you ask this same question every week. Let's see. Joest says, would be good idea to add the wallpaper stuff to FAQ, as well as maybe some other obvious random life questions, I suppose. Yeah, I should probably put the wallpaper question in the FAQ. People ask quite often about my wallpapers. But yeah, I should put it in there. But I guess I should say I don't mind people asking the same questions repeatedly. It doesn't bother me, you know, as long as they are good-natured questions, you know. I don't expect everybody to watch all of these streams. I really appreciate those of you that come here and hang out with me, but it's totally natural that people are going to ask questions that have been asked before and stuff like that. And somebody told me that the key to live streaming is being totally fine with answering the same questions over and over, and being happy while doing it. And that makes a lot of sense to me. More sense with every stream that I do. And it's fine. I actually quite like it. I guess it's a little bit how being a teacher might be like, or there's some overlap at least. Let's see. Vanjot says, hi, Andreas. I have a query. If I write a compiler without using LLVM, it is something on the basis of which someone can employ me, i.e. is it an employable skill? If you write a compiler with or without using LLVM, I think that is, that demonstrates a valuable skill, sure. But, you know, there's more to being employable than random projects in your portfolio, right? But if you have nothing in your portfolio, adding a compiler to it, definitely not going to hurt your chances of employment. And if I were evaluating your resume today, I would see your compiler and I would think, oh, that's cool. Here's somebody who's like really interested in deep technical work. So I would say that's a plus. But of course, it depends on what kind of job you're applying to. Refrag says, I was thinking of trying to implement a feature in Serenity. It's audio playing on various window events like moving, opening, or closing a window. I have it in my desktop environment and I find it pretty cool, but I also think it isn't the most useful feature. Do you think I should still try to do it? You know, I think it would be really annoying, but some people really like it. And there are times when I enjoy that sort of annoying stuff too. I wouldn't mind having the feature. I think it should be default off, but Having the ability to play audio clips on windowing events would be kind of neato. I'm not against it, as long as it's off by default. Let's see. Vanjot says, since it requires knowledge of theory of computation, compiler design, analysis of algorithm, and knowledge of data structures. So that's like following up on the, if I make a compiler, does that make me employable question? Right. So successfully building a compiler does demonstrate that you have grasped a number of important computer science concepts. So it is a plus to have a compiler on your resume, sure. Tom 14159 with the super chat. Thank you so much, Tom. I love your Tetris avatar. Really, really appreciate it. Tom didn't write a message, so we will just compliment Tom's cool avatar instead. Really cool avatar. Let's see. I just don't want to miss something up here. Thomas Q says, does Serenity implement those obscure POSIX functions like POSIX spawn p? POSIX spawn p. Dunk, dunk, dunk. Look at that. We have POSIX spawn p. So I guess, yes, we do implement some obscure POSIX functions. Username goes here says, have you ever considered changing Serenity's GUI to look more like Microsoft Bob? Yes, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. We'll see. We'll see. But I wouldn't count on it, but we'll see. Daniil says, that's great advice. I've been doing that quite often. Thank you a lot. Yeah, I'm really happy that you say that. I wish you the best of success with mistake management. I think everybody can improve the way they handle mistakes. Me too, for sure. But I've come a long way from where I started. So I'm happy about that. And I think you will have great success with that as well. Just Songo says, is SerenityOS under the hood namings based after Darwin by chance? For example, Windows Server for the graphical interface process. So yes and no. It's called a Windows Server because everything is called something server, like all the services in userland. So we have all kinds of servers like login server, lookup server, request server, system server. So of course there's also Windows Server. It is the same name as macOS Windows Server, but not necessarily because of that. It's just the same naming scheme. But the way that things are named in general in the userland, where like all the applications, you may have noticed that all the applications are just named what they are instead of having cute names that 99% of people forget, like the Mate desktop, for example, where I have to memorize that Pluma is the text editor, and what is it? Kaija is the file manager. We just call these things text editor and file manager, and this naming scheme is, I think it's quite funny, and it comes from Apple, actually, where this is how things are named internally. So Safari, for example, the Safari browser inside Apple is called web browser. And I always enjoyed that while working there, that like, well, internally we just call these things what they are, but marketing insists that we give these things names for the public. But here we don't have a separation of the public and ourselves. So I decided early on that what if we were just to just call things what they are? And that's where we are right now. Let's see. John Hermansen says, how about boot up and shutdown sounds? Again, I wouldn't mind those at all, as long as they are off by default. I boot and shut down the system approximately 100 plus times every day. And whatever sound you put in there, I'm going to be super annoyed with it within a few days. So I just want it to be off by default. But I'm not against the feature. I think it would be a cute little feature to have. Bill says, Andreas, don't you think targeting a common platform like Raspberry Pi would be a nice goal? Tight integration between SerenityOS and the Pi? Sure, if you're interested in that, please go right ahead and do it. I think there's all kinds of nice goals that people can make for themselves. That's something that's so beautiful about the SerenityOS project, is that everybody gets to decide what their own goal is and then work towards that. There isn't like one big common goal that I'm trying to push everybody towards. Instead, I'm just in my corner working on the things I care about, trying to make my little operating system that I want to use. And then there's hundreds of people who join the project with their own goals and ideas for what they wanted to do. And they're just working on that. So I certainly agree that that could be a nice goal for somebody who's really interested in that. So if you are, then I strongly encourage you to make that your goal and work on it, because I think you would have a lot of fun. Lucas says, I will be pleased if you can explain how you would have debug it. I don't want to spam, but I will send some context if you are up. Hi. Wait, is this backwards? Hi, it looks like I achieved to get a non-error, but not valid either result from file system access client. Try request file read only approved. I am so confused. Assuming that these messages are in the wrong order somehow, then you have a problem with try request file read only approve. I think it would probably be more productive because of the lag here. If you want to debug a specific issue, it might be more productive if we do it on Discord later, where we can make a quick back and forth. Since I don't have the context for what it is that's going on, so let's take a look at it on Discord later. Michael says, Andreas, can you implement Clippy and BonziBuddy? Dude, we have something way better than Clippy or BonziBuddy. Have you heard of CatDog? CatDog is a revolution in desktop companions. Look at this little guy. Is it a cat? Is it a dog? We just don't know, but it's so darn cute. Clippy, BonziBuddy, those things are old, obsolete technologies. He even says, well, hello friend, when he wakes up. That's CatDog. Love him. Let's see. Electric Milk says, our system sounds off by default, something that would fit in Serenity. Sure. Absolutely. M says, hi guys, do you guys know what we can do to migrate Makefile to CMake? Is there any tooling to help? I don't know if there's any tooling. I think it would be hard to make tooling for something like that, since Makefile is like a complete language, right? Like you can express so many things in Makefiles. I think you're probably gonna have to write CMake yourself. Not sure that a tool will help you, but I may be wrong. Maybe there are some tools. I suggest you Google it on Bing and look around, but I'm no expert on that, so I can't point you at any specific tool. Maybe somebody in the chat does, though. Protech AJ says, Andreas, how much is there left for you to learn given the level you're presently in? Like you have made your own operating system. I think there's probably a lot more to learn for me than I will be able to learn in the rest of my life. I know very little in the great scheme of things. I think it's not even that I know so much, it's just that I have been able to get myself to a point where I can figure out new things quickly, because I have tried a lot of things and I have a lot of context that just allows me to navigate new things easily, but I don't know a lot of things, so I have a lot of things that I need to learn. So I'm gonna say I learned maybe 1% of the things that I would like to learn, if I had infinite time. BBQ says, speaking of GUI, I really feel like the vastly superior GUI from the April Fool's video is missing from the theme options. Well, the problem with that GUI was that it was a huge mess. Like I changed so many random things to make it look that way that I made a bunch of hacks to metrics and to the way things were drawn, and all of it was ugly, and just to make it look that way for that video. Let's see. When did I want to find that video. What was it called? New direction for SerenityOS, something like that, right? Yeah. Look at this thing. To tell you the truth, I'm pretty sure that my Linux desktop looked almost exactly like this at one point, maybe like 2002 or something like that. I'm sure somebody's desktop looked exactly like this, probably still does to this day. And there was a time when I thought this was the coolest. I would have thought this was the coolest thing ever. But I'm not sure that offering this as an out-of-the-box theme is the best idea for SerenityOS. Vanjot says, Andreas, my dilemma is, should I spend time towards getting good at machine learning by first strengthening math skills like linear algebra, calculus, stats, or should I focus on compiler? Is building a compiler some sort of legacy thing? Should I go towards the hot topics of CS like AI and ML, or go towards things like compiler? Well, I think you should probably focus on what you're interested in and what you would like to work on in the future, I guess. I really don't know about these things, like if you should focus on what you should focus on. It depends on what your career goals are, I guess. If you want to get into the grind of like always staying on top of the latest buzzwords, then studying the latest buzzwords like AI and ML and I guess Web3 and these things at the moment might be a good idea. But if you want to, I think from my perspective, it's more productive long-term to learn fundamentals, because fundamentals are always relevant. Whereas buzzword technologies, it's like a hamster wheel where you always have to keep learning something new. I think compilers were relevant 30 years ago. They're going to be relevant 30 years from now. And it's not a bad thing to learn to write a compiler. Like, you're never going to regret learning how to make a compiler. You're probably not going to regret learning any of these things, but it depends on what kind of career you want to have and how much you want to move around from job to job and project to project and things like that. It's hard to know without knowing more about you and your aspirations. Thomas Q says, I think you should do some videos showcasing some technical parts of the operating system, like some data types in ACK. Some of those you don't see everywhere. Some videos ago you used intrusive list, and it would be nice to have a deep technical explanation of that. Sure. I mean, that might be a nice thing to make a video about. I guess my approach to showing technical parts of the operating system is to just show them in passing, and then leave it as an exercise for the reader or the viewer to go and figure out what it is and what they might use it for. Because my videos would become unbearable if I were to stop at everything and like say, oh, this is that data structure, it works like this, these are the members, this is the API, blah, blah, blah. So I have this sort of forward-moving, mentioning things in passing approach to it. But what you describe of like making videos showing these data types and maybe talking more in depth about them could be interesting content. Absolutely. Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all. Thank you. Hardcore Vibes YT says, is there going to be a follow-up to the getting Discord to load video? Probably. Andrew Castor says, there isn't one big common goal I'm trying to push everyone towards. He's quoting me here. And then he makes a emoji. I would argue you're trying to push everyone towards having fun hacking on the system. Yes. I think indeed I'm trying to push everybody to towards having fun with the system, having fun hacking on it. That is important to me. But how they have fun, that's entirely up to every individual. And I think a cool example of that is somebody like Zexa, who is having a blast, as far as I can tell, just drawing bitmap glyphs for the entire Unicode space, it seems like. And just clearly having a great time drawing glyphs, and somebody else is like writing code, somebody else is making icons, or there's all kinds of ways to have fun. And I'm gonna try to push everybody towards having fun in their own way, like the thing that they enjoy the most. Because as I've talked about many times, I'm a big believer in having the most fun. If everybody has the most fun and everybody works on the thing that they're personally interested in, then we get the best result. BEL says, think you didn't get it. I understand it's all personal, but also we should look at the pragmatic aspect. Desktop OS is meant to be used on bare metal. Limiting the hardware would make it easier. I think you are not getting it. It's less important to be pragmatic than it is for everybody to have fun and to choose what they personally work on. If that means that we make unpragmatic choices, I don't care. I want everybody to have fun. That's the most important thing to me. German WTB says, do you have any thoughts on the question why we sort of stopped large-scale OS innovation with mass adoption after Unix? I guess I don't really know. I don't think we necessarily did. I mean, operating systems are very different today than they were when Unix came out, or like when the last version of Unix proper was released, like version 7 or whatever. Just because they have the same C API doesn't mean that they're the same design anymore. Like a modern Linux system, for example, has very little in common other than API with Unix v7, I would say. So I think innovation has continued. Why hasn't the API evolved more? I think, I mean, I don't know what the correct answer is, but I guess it's because it works, and it works reasonably well. And the core Unix API is usable, and it achieves everything that we want to achieve for an API at that level. And then people can just stack their extensions on top of that. But there isn't like something so fundamentally broken or missing in the core Unix API that you need to overhaul it. And because of the large amount of software written for the Unix API, there's a high cost to replacing it with something else, because you would have to rewrite all that software. And I think the benefit you would get from changing to something, maybe nobody found something that would be so beneficial to change to. Let's see. Michael says, next April Fool's video should be support for IE browser toolbars. Yeah. I guess, man, April Fool's it's not as far away as I thought it was. It's like 2 months away. Last year I came up with the April Fool's video like a few days in advance. And I need to come up with some stupid new idea for this year, obviously. Let's see. Stepan says, finally catching the office hours live. Could you summarize how the IPC protocol and domain-specific language works? So that's something we've talked about many, many times, and I think I even have a video about it, or do I? I feel like I do. Yes, there's a code tour called the IPC system in SerenityOS. Now it's 1.5 years old, but it's still, I think it still explains roughly how it works. Yeah, this looks recent enough. Wait, I didn't look so recent though. Wow, look at that guy. Time flies, huh? Yeah, I'll link you that video in the chat. Let's see. Jeff says, the April Fool desktop looks great. I feel like a resurrection of that aesthetic is coming soon enough. We'll see. We'll see. Oh, hello, Zexa. Good to see you here. Nice of you to confirm that you're having a blast. Yeah, it is wild how many of these glyphs you've made, and Zexa has his own SerenityOS web server .net, and here's a page where it sort of tracks the status of the different Unicode ranges in our font. Oh wait, it moved somewhere. Okay. Wow, these pages are so fancy. Holy moly, I need to go here more often. 5,571 glyphs. Dude, you people are dedicated. I love it. That's so cool. Let's see. Just says, I meant to ask, in your time at Apple, what were your impressions/reactions about what Apple was releasing at the time? My apologies for confusing you earlier. I think my impression, while working at Apple, to be honest with you, my impression of our software was always that it was really unstable and unreliable, and I could never understand how we managed to make it work so well. And the reason for this was because when you work at Apple, then they ask you to live on sort of nightly builds of the operating system so that you can report bugs. And so I was always living on like master branch version of everything, of the operating system, of the window manager, of the terminal, of everything was like the latest version of everything. And it was always crazy unstable, and it completely shifted my feeling about Apple software, that it was just really, really awful. And but every time that we would put out a release, we would go through this process of a bug burn down, where we would systematically go through all the bugs that we had reported and try to fix them one by one. And by the time the release came out, it was an actually usable piece of software. And that process was fascinating to me. But it did ruin my feeling about Apple software quality for a long time. And since I've left Apple, I've been using Apple software on my phone, and it is nice because I've sort of recovered that feeling that it works well. But when I was working there, I just kind of thought that everything was a horrible piece of crap. So whenever, for example, there would be WWDC or something like that, and Craig Federighi would be on stage demonstrating some feature that I had worked on, or like anybody on stage would open Safari, I was always sitting there watching the demo live, feeling like cold sweats, like, oh, don't crash, and it never did while I was watching, so I'm happy about that. But it was, the Sausage Factory effect was very strong for me there. But thankfully, I was also able to absorb a lot of good things about it, and I sort of came to understand a lot of how the software development process works and what makes it work. And I try to take the good things about it with me into Serenity and try to create sort of an open source version of those the same development model. So, and I think we've been quite successful with that so far. Like the mono repo style development and like everything in house, extreme personal accountability, and like no having to go outside the project to find the person responsible for anything, things like that. Let's see. Paul Rat says Zexa is one sick mofo. 5,000 plus glyphs. Certified one sick mofo. Michael says, I want vertical and horizontal toolbars for the browser so you can get the actual web page content down to a 10 by 10 square in the corner of the screen. Ah, yes, living the dream. So we do actually support... Oh, wait, the title of this webpage is Well Hello Fonts. That's so good. I love it. So we actually have vertical toolbars, I was going to say, that you can't switch them at runtime from the user interface, but they are programmatically changeable at runtime. So Pixel Paint is the one application that uses a vertical toolbar, but it's conceivable that we could teach the UI how to move these around and flip-flop between vertical and horizontal toolbars. So it would be cool to have sort of docking areas which would automatically allow you to slot them into a different place, stuff like that. Jeff says, hey Andreas, a problem I've been having recently is feeling like I'm not sponging up all the information around me. It's infuriating when I learn about something and forget it later on. How have you been able to keep all of this technical and conceptual information fresh in your mind? I think I don't actually do that. I just let things slip out of my mind, and then I suck it up and take the time to reabsorb when I come across something that maybe I knew it once and I wish I would remember it better, but I don't, so I have to relearn it. If you watch my programming videos, you might often hear me say something like, ooh, I haven't worked on this thing for a long time. And have to reorient myself here, or something like that. And, things slip in and out of our mind, and I think you can't have like infinite technical context available to you. It's just, your brain doesn't have that kind of capacity. So it's better to just embrace it and try to get better at reacquainting yourself with things that you have known better before. It's not really that difficult to do, I find, if you open your mind and just sort of let yourself get comfortable with it again. And there are many concepts that I've totally forgotten about. And the way that I notice this sometimes is I try to explain to somebody how something works, and I realize halfway through that, wait a minute, I don't know where I'm going with this. And I don't think I'm explaining this data structure correctly at all. But then you can always go and look up how it actually works. So I wouldn't worry about this. Just embrace it, and don't be afraid to say things like, Oh, wait, I don't remember how this works. I gotta go look it up. Let's see. Joest says, ultimately, my two off-topic questions leads to one that's in relation of Serenity. How much did your work experience impact this project? I don't know how to answer that. What kind of metric do you use to measure something like that? I guess my work experience has impacted this project a great deal. I learned programming while working as a programmer, for the most part, and I learned about project management professionally, so I guess a lot, but I don't know. I don't know how to measure. Roosterhead says, question, the default welcome page has a retro feel to it. Is it okay to assume that's on purpose, or it's just something of it works for what we want, why change it? It's okay to assume anything, I guess, but I think it's just something that we threw together to have a collection of links to test pages. There's no great thought behind it. It's just there for convenience. We can certainly make it look nicer, and once the web engine gets to a point where we maybe don't need to have a bunch of test pages quickly on hand like that, but we have more like automated testing running continuously in the background, then we might change it to maybe like a little bit more of a user-friendly welcome page. Who knows? Koshvi says, does Apple use C++? I thought they hate C++ so much to the point nobody in Apple uses it. Apple has many very large C++ projects and employs many C++ programmers. Stepan says, I totally love the idea and video about the command palette. I wish every non-trivial program had it. We'll have to wait and support SerenityOS until I can daily drive it, I guess. Yeah, I love that about SerenityOS here, that we can make a feature for the GUI library and boom, it's available in every program right away. That's really kick-ass. Let's see, Devashish. Hello, Devashish. Nice to see you. Says, which codebase feels more solid? Apple's when you work there, or Serenity? That's that's a good question. Honestly, Apple's codebase was more solid because it had a lot of age. And things worked really well. The problem was that they have a really strong core, but whenever Apple makes new software releases, they, with the exception of macOS Snow Leopard, they always change things around at the UI level a lot, and they change all these user-facing functionality. So even though the core is nice and stable, all of those high-level UI changes just end up making everything feel unstable anyway. But the core code base underneath, I would say, is very, very solid. Darwin is solid. Core Foundation is solid. Like all of the like low-level components are pretty solid. Let's see. Electric Milk says, interested to hear your thinking on moving the DOM source, JS console, etc. to a bottom panel like other browsers. Do you think it's better for development to have them in Windows? No strong feelings. I guess I would love it if we could have a dockable solution where you could decide if you want to have a separate window or not. Personally, I have a bit of an aversion to the docking by default, because then this thing happens where I open the debug tools or the developer tools and it changes the size of the viewport. So just by opening the debug console, I would cause the page to relay out and disturb the content. So I like that about the current approach, that it opens in a separate window, nothing happens to the web content. So that is, yeah, that's my thought on that. I would love to have a dockable solution, but you can decide. Chihiro says, Very non-technical question for you, Andreas. Do you have that cute Blahai from IKEA? And what's your opinion about that cute thing? What on earth is that? Blahai. Oh, it's one of these plush toys. I don't have it. But I feel like I did have it at one point. When I lived in Norway, I went with my roommate once to IKEA, and I think we bought one of these. But I don't remember if it was this exact one. I feel like I've had this in my life at some point. My opinion is that it's pretty cute. Tomasz says, being an engineer is not knowing everything. It's having the capability of knowing where to look to find out. Damn straight. That's absolutely right. That's the real skill, just knowing how to figure things out. It's infinitely more valuable than memorizing a bunch of stuff. Let's see. Jeff says, thanks, Andreas, for the reassurance. We are humans after all. Absolutely. We are indeed humans, and we have flaws. We make mistakes, and sometimes we smell bad, sometimes we smell good, but we try to make the best of every situation, and it's going to be okay. Anyway, we are running out of time here, so I think we can actually start to round down. I really appreciate that everybody came to office hours, and I think we had a lot of nice little conversations here. It's amazing to me that we're still doing these, and we managed to find new things to talk about every week. Super appreciate all of you coming here. Really appreciate all the super chats. Thank you so much for those. And to everybody who asked questions, and to the people who kept answering some questions in the chat. That's really awesome too. And thank you, Kyle, for saying that you loved the Discord video. I really love making it. German WTB says, do you prefer the pixel perfect look of bitmap fonts or vector fonts with good anti-aliasing? I like a hybrid, I guess. I like a hybrid where you have both. Where smaller fonts are pixel perfect and larger fonts are anti-aliased vector fonts. That would be my personal preference. Kleines Filmrochen says, I just finished creating my GML pull request. Fantastic. We'll take a look. Okay, so we're out of time. Thank you all so much for coming and for hanging out. I really appreciate y'all. And if you end up working on SerenityOS this weekend, then please come hang out on Discord with us so we can talk about what you're doing and what we're doing and what we might do in the future. Anyways, see y'all next time. Bye.